You have now created, by my count, at least $4 billion companies directly, probably more than that. What would you say you are doing different than the average good founder?
So, listen, I have some unfair advantages, right?
I feel like I can rule the world. I know I could be what I want to. I put my all in it like no days off on the road.
Okay, Joe, thanks for doing this, man. And thanks for inviting me into the morning workout, the cold plunge, and everything in between breakfast.
Good to have you here, Sean.
So I want to start with lessons learned. One of them that we were talking about this morning when we were doing our workout was making decisions on blended reasons, or having like a blended strategy for how we're gonna win doing these 5 things, and why that sounds like a good idea to the average person, but it's actually a very bad idea. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and I wrote this piece online, like 9 lessons from Peter Thiel. I sent to all of Palantir. That's been like sent to all of my other companies as well, and it's one of my favorite pieces, and that's one of them. And it's one of these logic things where usually there's like one reason that dominates everything else, and that's just the nature of the world. Is that when something's successful, it's kind of like the power law rule, right? Like in a venture capital like fund, even there tends to be one thing that's successful that's like bigger than everything else, and that's true inside of companies as well. It's very unusual, like extraordinarily unusual, for there to be like 2 similarly equal like products or revenue lines or something like that,
right?
Especially early on in a company. So usually, if you think you have like 2 or 3 reasons for doing something, or 5 reasons for doing something, what that means is that you actually haven't figured out.
You have no
actual reason.
You have no strong reason.
You have no strong reason yet.
Yeah.
Like that means you have 5 weak reasons, which is not good. You want to find like what's like one really strong thing you're driving towards, and that's how startups work. And it's a really seductive trick. I mean, first of all, you have to be taking a big risk to even do a startup. It feels like, rather than like, a lot of people like do incubators because they're like, oh, I don't want to do one company.
Right.
I'm going to do 10 companies. Right. And like, by the way, that's like much less likely to have big success because you're not focused. So even within a company, they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to be like, well, here's 5 ways I'm going to make money. And like, no, man. If you really want to do a company, figure out the way you're going to make money. And that tends to be how it works, And
that applies to revenue streams. So 8 revenue streams means you probably don't have one awesome revenue stream.
Exactly.
Growth strategies. If you have 7 things we're going to do for growth, means you haven't figured out
which one's actually the one that's going to work.
The one that's going to just compound like crazy.
And it may change over time, but what's the thing that's working now that you're pushing on? Yeah.
And then the other version of that is blended reasons for doing something. I think I read once that Reid Hoffman kind of uses the same philosophy, and he gave the example of, if there's like a trip to China and I'm deciding, should I go to China? It's far away. It's going to take 2 weeks. And should I do this trip? He's like, and my chief of staff came with like a list of pros and cons.
Yeah, it's like multiple pros and
then a couple of cons. That's almost impossible. It's a guaranteed way to make mediocre decisions, is to do long blended lists of
If you don't have a key reason to be there, like stick to your work. Yeah,
exactly. That's what he said. He's like, if we don't have one reason that alone is worth doing, then we should just say no. Is that something you do?
Reid was one of the key minds at PayPal, of course, with Peter Thiel and others. So Who knows who actually came up with these ideas? It may all be Reid's ideas that I'm recycling. But he's a very smart guy.
Well, I say them as for mine now. So I think that's the best way to, the highest compliment is to meme an idea and to let it spread. And so Peter's helpful with that. He's, what are some of the other things? Like, do you remember, even at the beginning, one thing I kind of wonder is, you've been around a bunch of special people, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, all this stuff. Is it clear in the early days? Like, do you remember the moment where you're like, oh, this person's kind of different? They are that 5 standard deviations in intelligence or conviction or whatever.
One of we all try to like set strategies for ourselves and goals and whatnot. And like, I remember in college, I thought, wow, this is a really good opportunity at Stanford to reach out to a bunch of successful people and kind of learn from them, see who I admire, who I want to be like. And, I've met some of the legends of global macro finance who I'm still in touch with. I met a bunch of other big business people and run Fortune 500 companies. And Peter, to me, had by far the most interesting intellect. He was clearly just one of the smartest people I'd ever met. And he was interested in some of the same things I was interested in. He'd taken some of the logic farther than I ever had. So I always learned the most from conversations with him. So that to me was one of the reasons he was the most attractive to try to work with and try to build with.
And so before you start multiple other companies, you do Clarium, which is his hedge fund, I guess is the way.
Global macro fund, yeah. It's like the most fun part of finance. There's lots of parts of finance. Finance is like all sorts of areas. Global macro is looking from like the highest possible perspective at everything going on in finance. It's like the bond yields around the world, the flows of money around the world, how equities are being valued. They basically just from very top down, like what is happening in the world of finance and how do you map it out? And you look at relationships and you understand, of course, like, the Australian currency is going to be really correlated with the price of metals, and there's different ways in which they can get way off, and you can create a regression trading system if they're way too far off where you can make money based on the reversion. Right? But then you say, oh, normally I would trade this, but actually this is happening because China just invaded this thing over here. So actually it's not a good time to do it. And it's just really, really fun map of the world. And we were really interested in like long dated oil prices, what was happening with oil. We were very interested in how Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are the two big giant housing groups, they'd gotten to be much, much bigger in the US in the early 2000s. And they had these giant mortgage-backed security portfolios that are worth trillions of dollars. And they had to hedge these portfolios basically. And I won't go into all the details, it's a little bit esoteric, but based on how they were hedging their portfolios was completely changing the global fixed income markets, completely changing the pricing of bonds. And we found some really interesting ways to do things there. My favorite story though I'll give you is just to give, so we were working at the hedge fund, the market's open, we're in San Francisco, we're in 555 California, right? It's that big building downtown. Like after 9/11, I think Peter had a parachute in his room. I always told him he should have parachutes for us too. But anyway, it's like,
there's one parachute. Okay.
That was just a joke, but it's probably anywhere. But no, so it's like school office on the 42nd floor. And the market's open at 6:30, so the traders are supposed to be in at 6:30, except the first Friday of every month, you got to come in at 5:30 because the non-farm payrolls come out still now, the first Friday of every month at 8:30 a.m. on the East Coast. And it turns out this is a very important number because it shows you what's going on in job growth in the whole economy, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. And what was really cool is Kevin Harrington was our head of research, this like genius, crazy physics, biology, interesting guy and he ended up being on the National Security Council later, like super interesting, smart guy. And he like had mapped out this thing I'd helped him with where we realized that they were adjusting the numbers wrong based on seasonal adjustments. And so we were able to predict whether the number would hit or miss. And this thing would move bond markets like crazy, like hundreds of billions of dollars and move around based on this number. And we figured out they're systematically misdoing it. And this is totally legal. You're allowed to do this in finance. So we figured, okay, this is a mistake. 75% of the time we can make money trading this, and then we can adjust it and make it even better based on where the market was positioned. So if the market's going to be surprised and we can kind of tell there's a good chance it might be, we take a big position right like the night before or whatever, and then like make a ton of money that morning when it worked. And it was
at 4:30 in the morning,
with about 75% chance. And so you do it enough, you're going to do it well over time. And it was the most fun thing because we take these like giant positions on this thing, and you'd be there with like Peter and Kevin.
Is this just like the high stakes game of poker you've ever played?
It's the most fun game of poker, and you're like literally personally have like a few $1 million riding on it at a time. As early in my 20s, these guys, Peter probably had $100 million riding on it every time, and you're like high fiving if it goes right, or you're depressed if it goes wrong. It was it's just most fun high stakes game of poker.
Is he sweating, or what's his demeanor
everyone's like what's gonna happen? It's like so exciting, and then and you're like, I remember so many like celebrations. We'd all like go to like our favorite breakfast place afterwards if it worked out. It was pretty cool.
What'd you do if it didn't work out?
Sometimes we go there anyway, but for some reason in my mind, this is maybe who I am. I remember all these times it worked out. I barely can remember the times it didn't. I know it didn't sometimes, but like maybe this is like a serial entrepreneur sort of thing where you just see how the good memories,
right?
So it's like, but I remember it was a fun time.
That's an entrepreneur survival tactic.
You have to. You
block
can't
out the traumas.
All the traumas.
Because if you remember how hard something is, you're much less likely to start it again or do another thing.
Way I would have built all these companies if I had to force myself to like think about that too much.
The way you just described like the global macro fund, you're pretty young when you're doing this, and that's not what you were doing just before. So it's not like you had tons of experience.
My little brother got me reading like a bunch of economics and finance stuff when I was young. So I kind of had a weird both computer science and finance background. So, and I had opinions about it. So that's like so weird. Those are like my two things. And so so I knew that world pretty well. And you learn a lot being in it. You just do. You just have to be in it to do it.
But credit to them for betting on you to be able to do that. They could have hired somebody who's been doing that for 20 years in New York.
We talk about lessons from Peter Thiel. I think one of the most important ones I've seen from him that I've definitely taken to heart in what I've done is I'd much rather hire for talent and ambition and hard work than hire for expertise. So almost, and there's exceptions, right? So if you have a company that's already really working and already really scaling, and there's like a machine that has to be run, you want to hire the guy who knows how to run the machine. That's fine. That's the operator who knows what they're doing already. But before you've actually built the machine, or when you're doing something with a group in like kind of high finance or whatever, you want to hire for raw IQ and hard work and just iterating and figuring it out. And that's a different skill set than the people who run the machines.
What's your way of filtering for that IQ? How do you interview, or what are the signals you look for?
This is like super hard. I think you start with like
hard math problems at people. What are you doing?
We used to do that at Clarion. We had these really hard problems. I remember my friend Suji over on Dropbox, one of his partners there at his new ventures, Chen Li, was like the highest scorer on this test I gave. He's a smart guy. We had to do really hard tests. But once I already had around me a bunch of people who were really top talent, it's like they knew people like, oh, who is the smartest guy in your physics PhD at MIT? Who is, things like that. So it's like, it's like you kind of get a network that's already really solid, and then you go out from there.
And so let's go more on that. So two things. One, Ben told me something that like, there's some number, I don't know the exact number, 20, 30 people who have worked at your companies that have then gone on to start like unicorn companies. Dude, what is that number roughly?
Oh gosh, I don't actually keep track of the official number, but there's over 20 people who've worked directly for me who've started huge companies. And it's something I'm really proud of, is that we've had a lot of super talented people. And, in some ways it's like, I like to like back my mind, like, oh yeah, I'm a great guy. I take credit for shaping them. But in some ways it's like, they were already really amazing. And so maybe I'm just good at convincing them to have worked with me ahead of time,
Right.
So it's like, there's
a nature nurture thing, right? So
there's some of both. I do like to think that we've given them useful frameworks, just like I learned from Peter. They might have learned some of these things from me too, but I mean, one of the ones, not all of them I've even backed. Like some of them I backed, some of them went off and then did it themselves, and
right,
which usually they let me back them. Though.
Yeah, yeah, that's the worst when you didn't get the call.
Actually, I'm still proud. I'm still proud of. Like I'll tell you, the guy who came right out of school to help run Addepar with me, and I was like, he became president of the company, super talented guy. And I did not know what I was doing, even though I just already done Palantir. There's all these mistakes I was making because there's like things I didn't realize I had advantages of Palantir. And Addepar is a multi-billion-dollar company now. It's great, but there's things that took longer. There's mistakes, but there's also obviously good things we did because the company worked out really well. And I think he had like one off on his own, and he had like his own tough time or whatever for a little while afterwards. And then he ended up partnering with someone, and he started a company that became worth $3 billion in like 4 years, and he sold it.
Wow.
Which I'm like, oh wow, that's pretty fucking cool. So, but I was like, and they didn't bring anyone else into that company, but I was still really proud of the fact that I'd worked with this guy, right, and then he'd gone on and had like crazy success. I mean, it's a cool feeling, Right.
But for the record, I'm more proud if I got to invest too, right?
I know, come on, just take care of your buddies.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it was most of the, like 95% of them. It's like people will bring me in, and I'll still like help them, we'll coach and work with them together.
So let's do big hit number 2, Addepar.
Yeah.
You explain in layman's terms what even is Addepar, and then I have some questions for you. But let's first do the explain like I'm 5 years old. What is Addepar?
So Addepar is the leading wealth management technology company in the US. And so there's people who work at what are called RIAs, registered investment advisors. There's tens of thousands of these, and they will help you or your parents or whoever kind of manage their wealth. They'll give you reports. They'll do your trusts and estate. They'll just do everything around kind of the wealth planning. Man, it was really freaking hard. We built all this stuff, and we like hooked up to Schwab and Fidelity, because those are like two of the biggest, everyone's heard of those, right? The biggest custodians. And we had all this wrong data in the reports. Like, what are we doing wrong? And it turned out the data coming from Schwab and Fidelity was oftentimes wrong. I'm like, what is wrong with this space? It's like the whole thing's a mess. So it was a hard company to build. It took about 3 or 4 years before we really got to the point where it was useful to people.
And so you didn't give up though during that time.
Oh no, that's like the last, like you have to have a personality where you're not going to give up. I mean, I'll give up if it turns out someone else has already solved it perfectly. Like if Addepar already existed, it would have been a stupid thing to do. And I learned that, then maybe you give up and pivot. But the fact that it's just a hard problem, you're not going to give up. You're just going to like double down and like fix it,
Interesting. So you don't give up if it's too hard, too messy.
But it's like, that's better. That means once I do solve it, it's going to have this giant moat. Like Addepar has the biggest freaking moat. We were talking earlier about guys like Rocket Internet will like go around copying things and annoy people. Like good luck if you want to try to copy that. You got to take $1 billion in 10 years,
Right.
Like no chance. No chance.
You talk about hard work. When I was doing research for this, I called somebody who works on your team, and I said, tell me about him. What's he like? What's it like to work with him? One of the things they said was like, he's always on. I've never seen him just go dark, go off, or just like turn his brain off, or be like, I just want to chill on the beach and just drink Mai Tais and not do anything. Is that
this is like
accurate for you?
This is like my game though. I mean, I think you have to love what you're doing, right? So like you shouldn't play games you don't like,
right?
And if you're not enjoying the game, you gotta switch it up.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm doing this because I really enjoy it. It's really fun. I'm really good. I think one of the Aristotle would talk about how like one of the highest pleasures is like using your mind in its highest capacity, right? So let's like explain, like you actually enjoy chess more than checkers if you're good at both, because chess has more levels to it. It's a more complicated game. And so you want your mind to be engaged in interesting, complex, useful things that are getting things done. It's like a positive part. I think it's how humanity works.
Right. How do you still recharge or just get clarity of thought? Because one of the challenges is if you're always on, you might not have that chance to step back and
pause
and reassess.
You do need open time for creativity. I've noticed when I overschedule myself, I'm not nearly as creative then. And I think the cold plunge helped, right? I don't know if that cleared your mind.
That was a quick.
You were in there for a little
60
bit.
51 second reset we had.
I think I stayed in for the full.
Yeah, you actually did 2 plunges. That was pretty good. What is this typical schedule like? What's a day in the life? Because you got your fund, you got companies, you got all kinds of stuff. You got your podcast.
Yeah, my number one is 8VC, and 8VC has a build program, which is my favorite part of it. A third of our money now goes towards building new companies. So my favorite thing is like the strategy for recruiting talent, and then strategy sessions with to figure out what we're going to build.
Right. Yeah. And so when you said strategy for talent, what was the other one? Strategy for building the company? Is that
you're basically
strategy.
When you're the way I look at opportunities for new businesses is you're looking for conceptual gaps in the world. You're saying like, here's where this industry is now. Like, here's how this thing is working. Here's how this process is done in the economy. And here's where it could be if it was using like the right new technology or the right new incentives or this right new effective cultures or whatever it is that like could be better about it. And the question is not just, it's actually very easy to find conceptual gaps in the world. I'll put forward. If you spend some time with like a few smart friends and you like study an industry and talk to people, you usually will find, oh wow, this thing could be done this way. And so the harder question is not just what it could be done, but like, what's the path to get there? What can we put in place that would allow us to get it there? How do we build this thing? How much is it going to cost? How do we make the people want it? So there's a lot of things, for example, in like healthcare and hospitals that are done completely wrong, but it makes the hospitals more money. So it's like, so even though it's like clearly not the right way of doing things, they're not going to just fix it. You have to find some way to get from here to there with the actors being willing to do it.
Right. So let's do an example. So give me an example, either maybe something that's top of mind because you're thinking about it right now. Maybe it's not all figured out, or a recent one.
Yeah. So a recent one,
gap and a path that you kind of figured out.
100%. So it turns out that there's tens of thousands of loading yards around the country in logistics. These are places where trucks come, they get in line, they drop things off, they move things around, they pick things up. And it's a pretty interesting area. And like the biggest warehouse company in the country is Prologis. And it turns out the founder's investor with me is based in nearby in California. We're back there. And then it turns out there's like a handful of the biggest carrier companies like Ryder, you've probably heard of, and others. And we actually sold a company to Ryder, so we're close to those guys too. And so because we knew a bunch of these guys, we started analyzing what can we do with AI to make your yards better. And what we figured out is that if you put just a couple cameras in, at first we thought we need 6, but just a couple cameras, you can kind of watch and map out where everything is, map out how efficient the gate is, map out the processes, create accountability and incentives for people to go faster, create ways of pinging the carriers if it's backed up to use the other loading yards nearby. Just like basic little ways on the margins of like making these things work better and timing them and creating, because you want a little bit of competition, because people always respond well, if you do it properly. And so we've mapped this out, and we ended up founding a company with a really strong AI team. And we ended up kind of co-founding it with the warehouse companies, the carriers and others based on their needs. And it's really cool because the way we built it with them is we have like a few $100 million revenue already built in that we can scale up into their yards they already own. And then we can have something all the other yards want to use as well.
Let's do more details. So you're already kind of adjacent to that world because you've done stuff, but how does the brainstorm work inside your office or wherever? When does somebody ask the question, hey, could you use AI for these loading yards? Like how did take me all the way to that? Like where does a question like that even come from? So, where does the nugget of insight come from?
So my partner Jake's in charge of logistics and supply chain. He's the kind of biggest driver here, and he's done some strategy sessions with our friends who are running these different companies we're close to. We'll get together. I have a vineyard in Napa Valley, and we bring every year the 100 top logistics CEOs, and we'll drink and strategize and hang out. It's like a good way
and you kind of are asking them questions to try to find their pain points.
What are your problems? What works? What are you spending money on? What are you seeing? And we'll bring new entrepreneurs, and we're backing and get their take on things. And we'll bring what are called EIRs, entrepreneurs in residence, who will talk with them and iterate on the idea.
Right.
So we kind of knew loading yards is a big thing. Let's go talk and iterate on ideas, what we could do to apply new things to it. And in this case, there's a really strong AI team that happens to be in the UK that we'd met through other friends that had worked on some really cool visual problems we thought was very, very good for this, and ended up recruiting them as co-founders, which worked out really well. So we're constantly on the lookout for separately for talents.
Do some napkin math. You're like, okay, so if we can improve the loading yards by this, that's the size of the prize, and then that kind of clears a hurdle for you.
Yeah, this is, and the other thing here, which I don't love, but is definitely helpful, is California had some new regulatory rules about things you had to actually map out as well. So they're going to have to do something anyway, but why not create more value based on and then be the thing they put in when they're going to have to do it anyway in the next year.
Right.
Yeah, the rules coming up. There's logistics has had a few of these things. There had some rule on telematics where you had to I think for purposes of not making people drive too long, you had to record things differently, which was kind of an insertion point for a couple of telematics companies we helped back as well. which is the thing that tracks the trucks and stuff. So there's things like that where the regulatory thing was helpful too. And then, yeah, you sit down, you map it out. You've known the people for a long time. I mean, the one of the unfair secrets of business is the more success you have, the more it's like a platform for a bigger thing you can do next time. And that's just the way it is. You just got to keep in the game. Because like, it's like I think when I was really young, I used to think, I could start a business and make a lot of money and then go to the beach. And then that'd be like fun. And that's not nearly as fun as the fact that once you've already started and successful once, now you get to do like bigger things more easily.
Right.
So it's like, and that's why, like, I think when you're young, partner with someone else who already has that unfair advantage, help them use their unfair advantage, and build something with them. Now you have all these extra unfair advantages. You could do it again. So this is like, there's like this naive thing where like, you're like this lone business founder. I think you can do that, but it's so hard.
Right. Why play the game on hard mode?
Yeah. Why play the game on hard mode? Why not find, there's so many places in the world where there's unfair advantages, and like an unfair advantage. What I mean by that is like every time you have a success, you now have the respect and attention and understanding of all these people who will then help you do the next thing, right? And once you prove you're competent once, then I have a bunch more things I could be doing now if I have more competent like young people around me who want to be entrepreneurs and partner with me. We have a bunch of them, but we always need more because there's the thing we lack. We don't lack ideas. We don't lack money. We lack really talented, hardworking people with persistence.
I love that. That was so good. Can I come back for seconds? Can we do another example, another gap, or another origin story of one of these ideas that I think makes
I'll give you another crazy gap. I mean, these are I'm taking big swings right now, so these are gonna sound a little crazy, but like I was pretty bullish on China like 15 years ago. A lot of us were. I thought I was opening up. A lot of my friends there were like reading Milton Friedman and free economy stuff. I'm like, this is gonna be great. There's so many smart people there. So we start making bets there. We start working there, doing a bunch of stuff. And then this guy Xi Jinping takes over. And then like I'm told by all these different senior people there, like, Joe, none of the stuff that you want to work on here is going to be allowed. It can't be foreign. And I'm like, oh, that's too bad. So I just stopped working there as much. And then I kind of hear from them like terrible things are happening. And then a couple of them disappear. And then I hear he's making all these engineers work on defense. I'm like, okay, this is pretty effed up. I'm kind of nervous about this now.
Right.
And we start mapping it out. And at the same time, we'd done Palantir, started in 2003. So this is now like 2015, 2016. And I'm not running Palantir anymore, but I'm still an advisor watching it. And like a few of my guys there are noticing that the defense world in the US has gotten to be like a lot more dysfunctional, a lot more broken. There hasn't really been. So what happened in defense is all these companies consolidated in the 1990s after the Cold War spending went down. So they all merged and became like these giant primes. And these primes started acting a lot more like government agencies themselves, like not super nimble, not super adaptive. Kind of like the way they get the contracts is by having the right lobbyists, not necessarily. But they have to convince, we call it innovation theater. They have to pretend they're innovating, but they're not necessarily great at innovating because they're so big. They have no competition. And so we're like, oh, this is kind of scary. All this stuff, like none of the best engineers are going into these primes. Their stuff's getting worse. Meanwhile, China has the best engineers. They're getting better. We better do something. And so three of my best ex-Palantir guys, they partner with Palmer, of course, start Andrew. You've talked to him before. So I backed them early along with Peter. And I'm like, okay, guys, we're back in defense. Let's figure out what the hell else to do here. So we basically mapped out like what are 20 new possibilities in defense. I want to find 20 of them just to see, and then we're going to choose what's the most important one.
And by the way, is that something you tell your team, like, come to the table, I want to hear 20 ideas?
Yeah, well, you have to have like a guy whose job it is. You have to have the guy who's helping them. You have to have like advisors who are able to like get them into the right places to talk and explore. But let's talk to our smartest friends in this space. Let's talk to our network. I want to hear about 20 ideas of new things, like, and I want to see where we think gaps might be. And we come back and there's like 8 or 9 pretty good answers. There's a few things that I thought were bad answers, but we find some interesting stuff. And one of the areas that's pretty cool is it looks like there might be new possibilities in EMP, in electromagnetic pulse space. And it's really directed EMP, of course. You don't just want to set one of these off and screw up all your stuff. But what an EMP does is it fries electronics, right? And so it turns out that if you can direct these, what it is you're taking microwave energy and you're shooting it in a blast, you can actually turn things off. And the government has spent billions of dollars on this stuff, but they hadn't really applied any of the new chips basically at all. And
you want that to protect against like drones, for example?
That's one of the really good ways of doing it. So basically you can have a chip, you can basically control power on very small time scales. You could take the gallium nitride emitters, and you could build this correctly with a top talent. It turns out there's like a co-founder who's a friend of mine from Stanford, who's just a genius, who helped figure a lot of this out also. And you could shoot down things like 10 times farther away. And theoretically you could use this against missiles and turning their guidance systems off. You could use it against a truck coming to your base really fast. You just blast it. It might be that the truck has a terrorist coming to shoot you and you want to turn it off. It might be there's a pregnant lady, they're trying to get to the base to give birth. Like, you don't want to necessarily have blown it up, right? So it's good by blasting it and you're not turning the truck off, you're not killing the person. So pretty cool, like non-lethal way of like stopping stuff that's giving you trouble.
Right.
And long story short, we were able to put together money, put together a prototype, And with less than $30 million in the second round, we got to the point where we fought our way into a contest against the other primes. And so basically, one of the key things in government is like we're always trying to get them to have contests. The primes do not want contests.
Like, how do we compete on merit, not on longevity, relationships?
I'm not going to be better at playing golf with the senator,
right?
But if you can let me into the contest, then maybe we can win, right?
How do you convince them to do the contests?
That you push the Congress to make laws to allow competition. There's competent generals, there's competent admirals. Thanks to Palantir and SpaceX, people had seen outsiders massively outperforming, and they're more open to the ideas. So we're pushing things in the right direction.
Gotcha.
And so they do this contest, and like they didn't really take us seriously because the other guys had really spent billions of dollars on this. Like, what can you kids do, right? That's kind of like the old mindset in the U.S. in the 1950s, 60s is like innovation is expensive. Outsiders aren't going to be able to do it. And that was true 50, 60 years ago. But long story short, we ended up shooting down the hardened drones 9.5 times further away than the other guys. They actually had to use binoculars to like watch us like shooting them down really far away, and people were just like flabbergasted.
Like everybody was lined up, and it's like, okay, we'll see who performs. He's like, you're going to need binoculars to see ours because it's going to be out of range compared to whatever else is doing.
I think the people were just totally shocked. That's the same amount of power.
Epirus, is that the name of the company?
Epirus is a cool name. Epirus was a name in legend of the bow of Theseus. Theseus started Athens. And his bow had infinite arrows. And so this is kind of like a bow with infinite arrows because you can keep firing the pulses.
That's cool.
They're 10,000 of a second
Wasn't
pulse.
Palantir like a Lord of the Rings reference?
Palantir was Lord of the Rings. So Epirus is more real mythology. Palantir is more in the fake mythology world. Right. But no, we have quite a few things named after Tolkien and stuff. It's an inspiring story. The idea with Palantir is the seeing crystals, right? And in the story, this is super dorky, but in the story, they're built by like the elves of the Uttermost West. And they're basically this thing created for the humans to get rid of the bad guys. But then 2,000 years later, a bad guy takes over the technology and is using it for evil. And so the idea with Palantir is we thought we were very civil liberties obsessed. So we wanted to build it in a way that would like go after the bad guys, but then we got to be able to watch the watchers and be really careful about how the technology is used, because it's very obvious if you're doing something to kill the bad guys that a bad guy could use this for something horrible.
Right.
And so it is a dangerous area. We believed it was a necessary thing to create, and we ended up eliminating thousands of terrorists. So we were happy with the results.
So what's fascinating to me is that not only have you had multiple hits, but they're in areas that are different, but also just hard areas where those are not even ideal. I don't think about these like the logistics yards or EMP pulse technology. Like these are so in different domains. I'm curious, is that intentional? Meaning, do you like, because most of the entrepreneurs around me in Silicon Valley were like, oh, B2B SaaS, what's a problem? Oh, let's make a to-do list app because I know that problem. I'm so familiar with it. Is it a strategy for you to go to fish where other people are not fishing, or is that just what happened?
No, I think it's definitely a strategy of sorts where you don't want to build like yet another like restaurant app or yet another to-do list app, because it's like that's what every other 21-year-old's thinking about. Like it's probably why I missed Stripe early on, as we'd been at PayPal and I had to like see every payment app. There's like literally hundreds of payment apps. I was like, oh God, because it's because Peter would make me take the meetings after PayPal. I didn't want to do them anymore. So it's like, no, you want to listen. There's parts of the world that are big parts of the economy that are very important that are not as exposed to technology cultures. And so you want to kind of take our advantage is we have a really tough technology culture, and let's figure out how to expose it to something that's not likely to have seen that before, and then find ways to work together to fix problems.
And what are some other ideas? Either I want to either hear ideas that you're not doing just because you can only do so many things at once, or it might be that would work, but it's too small for me, or it's not like kind of using my current platform can do bigger things, but this happens to me all the time. I see ideas that somebody could do that. I'm tempted to do it because it's so clear to me, but it's like, that would be not the right game for me to be playing right now.
There's so many things that if I had the right talent, I'd be doing more. I do a lot in the wealth management world. I think that the process of starting a trust and like the actual legal work around this stuff could be very automated with AI. You could have like a smart lawyer and like a few smart engineers. You could like have a whole new trust company and a whole new like estate management company. We have SaaS software for estate stuff you'd plug into. And I have a lot of distribution for this ready, but I would need like the right engineers and AI people. And I'm not sure if it's bigger than $1 billion or $2 billion business, but it's still worth it, and it saves a lot of time. So, but I'll give you a really big one I want to do, but I don't have the right people around me. Local government. So we just sold OpenGov for $1.8 billion. And local government, there's a lot of lessons from this company, a lot of mistakes. So it took us 12 years. Zach Bookman, the CEO, my co-founder, did a great job. We learned that you only can really do things they already have a budget for. There's about 90 things local governments pay money for software to do, and OpenGov does about 40 of them. So we learned the space really well. It's big, right? It's a lot of processes. Anyway, the idea is that there's trillions of dollars spent by local governments, and a lot of them can't find the right staff for certain processes. And a lot of them have people are retiring soon too. So I think a BPO, a business process outsourcing thing for certain tasks for local government that are augmented by AI could be like just a huge business to basically help them with this. And right now it's not a standard way they work, but I could see if you do it really well, it could become a standard way. And that's the kind of area where you can make tens of billions of revenue before anyone even notices you, because it's such a big part of the economy. So I know that's another
So what would
idea.
the first like 6 to 12 months of that company look like?
You'd basically have to find early partners willing to trust you and work with you on outsourcing one of those 90 processes. And it'd be something like where you like augment their ability to do licensing and permitting faster, or you're augmenting some of their grunt work on tracking their assets and asset management, or you're doing something for their budget for them automatically. It's way faster. So the CFO doesn't have to hire 3 people. They can only hire 1 person, which is you, or something like that.
Right.
But you have to go in and figure out what processes are cities even willing to let you do. And it's a very unnatural thing because it's not how they work right now. But it's one of those things where there's like a secular trend towards like, local government not having enough money. So if you could find ways to save them massive amounts of money and make a higher quality service, there could be something there.
Right. All right. I want to play a little agree or disagree game. So I want to say a statement and I want to hear you agree or disagree with it. So the first one is on this idea of big swings that are solving like huge problems, mission oriented things, versus like getting your first win under your belt. A guy came on the podcast and he said, my theory is you go get your nut and then you work on your noble mission. And he's like, you go and you develop your skills, you make a few $1,000,000, you get personal autonomy, and then you should pick a noble mission, a noble quest, and go on that. Agree or disagree with that philosophy?
I agree. In general, I think it's a really good thing to do. You want to have a solid base before you do something that's like a huge, crazy, risky quest. You don't want to be like poor for 12 years while you're doing something if you can help it. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to be the path for everyone, but if you can do what he said, that's a really great way to do it.
Okay. Another one. A lot of people say that ideas are cheap, ideas are a dime a dozen, execution is everything. And I agree that execution is very important, but I think ideas really matter too. I think that project selection, picking the right market to go after is a huge lever. So I think that the execution is everything philosophy is BS. Agree or disagree?
That's a tough one because I've seen a lot of good ideas they actually aren't worth that much because they couldn't actually bring together the talent to do them. So it's necessary but not sufficient. You do need both.
Right.
The execution is the harder part, but you're right. You can have amazing execution, and I've seen this and people going after the stupidest ideas, and it's not going to yield something. So you need both, but the ideas by themselves are not that valuable.
Okay,
that's what I'd say.
Another one. Focus is a superpower. And I would say that, like we were talking about this earlier, you recognize the value of focus and just compounding one thing. But you've also done a variety of things. Agree or disagree that, focus is the way to go. Focus should be the strategy. Focus
is clearly the right strategy for the most successful people in the world. If you look at the wealthiest people in the world, they nearly all focused and compounded over a very long length of time. If you look at Palantir and Addepar, the 2 companies where I focus full time on them, they're 2 of my most important companies. It's I think when you're having impact on the world in different ways, sometimes it's okay to do different things. I think philanthropically, I think for me, coaching entrepreneurs is something I enjoy. I think I'm obviously creating a lot of value right now, but I think as an entrepreneur, as a business person in general, you especially if you haven't already had like a giant win, you should just focus and get that giant win and compound. Right.
You're friends with Elon. What's something you've learned from him, or something you admire about him? Maybe that the rest of us don't know, who only know him from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say I really admire his boldness and his obviously he's really good at focus. He's really good at just saying no, even to friends about anything. It's just not like tied to what he's like really passionate about and focused on to win. And he's just really, really bold at like clearing like nonsense out of the way and clearing mess out of the way and just like going right for the thing that matters, right for the substance. So I think most people in my life would think I'm maybe too bold or too direct or too extreme, and Elon's like a whole step further, which I think is great to see. I'm like, okay, I could do better at this.
There's more here, yeah.
I could be more myself in that direction, and I'd be more successful if I would. I'm obviously done very well, but I think he's a whole nother level of bold, and that's something that it's good to see that for me because it reminds me that that's a good direction for entrepreneurship.
Is he focused though? Because he's got like 5 things. He's got Twitter, he's got SpaceX, he's got Tesla, he's got Neuralink, he's got Boring Company, he's got so many things. how do you square that? Is it focus or is it?
I mean, I think he was insanely focused for a very long time on the things he was doing and on scaling them. And I guess, yeah, sure, there were two companies for a very long time after doing one company for a very long time. And, he's at a level of success, again, societally, where there's things that really matter for society that only he can do. So it makes sense if he would expand that. I think I told you earlier, my partners are allowed to work on up to 6 things at once. And I think when you're like coaching and like managing things and stuff, I think that's about the right amount. I think if you're just operating, you want to do like 1 or 2 at most.
Right.
Yeah.
Last question, because I think we got to go, but my whole thing when I come to an interview like this is, what's the one question that really matters? Like, forget the hour, like what's the one question that really matters? And all the questions I've asked you have been beating around the bush of this one thing. So now I'm going to ask you it directly, which is, you have now created, by my count, at least 4 billion-dollar companies directly, probably more than that. I call that the entrepreneur's grand slam. Mm-hmm. You have done something that anybody who wants to make one successful company would be envious of. How does he do it? You see also a lot of other founders. You meet them through your fund or just people who probably come up to you. What would you say you are doing different than the average good founder?
So, listen, I have some unfair advantages, right? And it's actually not that hard once you've been really successful to do it again relative to the first time. But what am I doing differently? I have a huge talent apparatus. So we have people at like dozens of universities. We have all sorts of things we do.
What does that mean? You have people at universities. What are they doing?
It's like you'll have fellows who apply, and you'll have people who run your program there. You'll host parties and meet talent. You'll have a certain playbook we've built since Palantir of knowing how to show up.
So you have like a scouting department almost.
Yeah, you have like a huge talent scouting department, and works in different ways, different places, and it's really talented people. We spend a lot of time, and each of our partners and I, that's our job, is to scout for talent and to use our network. And the more wins you have with smart people, the more you get to meet their smart friends. And so we have a huge advantage in talent, first of all, because that's really key. We have a huge advantage of like knowing the people who run a lot of big industries and like having good relationships with them, having them as advisors, having them as being part of things we've done where we can like understand what's happening in those industries, get quick feedback and iterate on ideas. Like one of the biggest mistakes founders make is they have an idea and they're afraid someone's going to copy it. They're afraid the idea is valuable. It's really dangerous to think that ideas are too valuable, because then you just don't share them. You think that they're yours. And so one of our advantages is that one of the Peter Thiel thought experiments was, imagine there's 5 founders who each have an idea, and like 4 of them are like secretly working on it, and one of them is like talking to everyone and iterating, like which of the 5 is going to win, right? So it's clearly the guy who's iterating a ton. And if 5 people have the same idea, we're able to have that same idea and then like iterate faster than anyone else, because we know everyone running everything, and we know how to get back, how to get to the right answer much more quickly. So not only do we have the best talent, but we're able to iterate on ideas with people who respect us, with people we involve. And then whenever we start a company, maybe this is a mistake, because maybe I could have had a lot more money, but I've always been like a minority owner of my companies. I've always been like someone who might have like when we start out the build program, our fund might take 20%, and when my team and I might take 10%. So we might have 30 total, and like maybe 35 or 40, but we have something where it's less than half, and we're very generous with the founders, with the early employees, with the advisors, with the partners. So like when we start these things, like just even from the beginning, I don't have to wake up in the morning being the only one worried about this thing. There's another 30 smart people waking up and that's their focus, and they're on it. And that's such a big advantage to like have other people like obsess over this thing, and are people who truly feel like co-founders, by the way. I think it's one of the big mistakes. You're like, I'm the founder and you guys are the people working, like what are you getting from that, other than your ego? Like, I'd much rather, there's so many companies that people don't even know I'm the founder of, and the people, and that's way better, because first, they're not going to harass me about stuff, and like there's people who are proud founders who get to be out in the press doing it, and they're going to sleep worried about it because this is their reputation and their focus.
In the intro, I'm going to say something like, this guy has started more billion-dollar companies than anybody in America, which I think is an amazing claim to fame. But forget about $1 billion. Let's talk about $1 million. The name of the podcast is My First Million. And I went and read a Quora answer that you did. Somebody said, if I want to make $1 million, how should I invest my money? Mm-hmm. And you said something like this. You said, I'll pull it up. You go, if you want to make $1 million, it's not about how you invest your money. It's about how you invest your time. And you said, it's about how disciplined you are with investing your time. How should somebody who wants to make $1 million invest their time?
it's right. You can't just make $1 million from investing for probably the average person. Maybe you can over like 50 years or something. My grandma passed away at 103 last year, and she was a multimillionaire, having grown up in the Depression just from saving money and cutting coupons. And that could work for 100 years. Being thrifty, like that is a thing. Like over a very long time horizon.
I think you'd said like she bought one stock or something. Also, like
my grandfather worked for Abbott, and she held it for like 60 years. It happened to work really well. Great, really good for my cousins and their inheritance. But she was a wonderful lady. But in general, that's not probably how you want to make money. You want to make money, especially these days. I mean, gosh, going back then, it was probably a lot harder. But these days, there's so many places with your time you can learn how to help build things, how to help create things, how to help be useful to other people. And like that's what you want to be doing. You want to be finding what are you passionate about, what are you good at. You have to figure out what you're good at. You have to be willing to say, this is what I'm not good at, this is what I'm good at. And then who else is good at this too, who I could maybe learn from, who I could be like, and spend your time. Try to find a way to help those people, try to find a way to learn how their businesses work, be part of a business and growing it. And that's how you see how everything works. And if you're talented enough, then that the people you succeed with, they're probably going to be able to help you do something new later.
And that's what happened to you, right? That's how you spent your time. My understanding, if we walk back in the journey, it's you're in college, you go to Stanford, and you end up working at PayPal. You become an intern at PayPal.
I tried a couple times. They rejected me the first time I applied.
What happened? Why did they reject you?
I was a freshman at Stanford, and I remember being at a whiteboard with Max Levchin, and he probably doesn't remember this. He was the co-founder with Peter on the tech side, and arguing about some tech thing.
Was PayPal already a big deal? Is that why you wanted to work there?
It wasn't that much of a big deal yet. Like Peter Thiel wasn't who he was. Elon Musk wasn't who he was. Like those, their companies combined to start it. But I saw like all the smartest people, all these people I admired, and all these kind of iconoclasts going there, like people who thought differently,
And so you try 1 year, rejected, try again the second year, you're in. What's your job? You're an intern at PayPal. What are you doing?
Oh, it's not very glamorous at all. They basically had me setting up the PeopleSoft instance, which is terrible. But I sat next to this guy. We were in Roloff, who's now like a star partner, Sequoia, was a CFO. And we were kind of in his domain at first. And I sat next to this guy who was managing all the money on Bloomberg, like a treasury thing. So I got to learn finance and treasury. And then what was happening is the big challenge in the companies, we were going bankrupt because the Chinese and Russian mafia were stealing all of our money at the time. And so I ended up like hanging out after work and with all these guys who were like working on how do you stop the bad guys.
Because PayPal's like a honeypot. It's got all the money.
So like you go to 7-Eleven and the clerk there is like maybe having a bad year and angry at capitalism, who knows? And so they're writing down secretly the numbers on the credit cards, and they write down 500 of these numbers. They can sell them each online for $5 or $10. The Russian mafia is buying them up, right. And then all of a sudden you get a charge back that says $200 on PayPal to something, and you're like, I didn't do that. So you charge it back, and then PayPal's left with the bill.
Right.
And this was like costing PayPal several $1 million a month, and a lot of our competitors went bankrupt. And so we got to learn at the time how to basically stop the bad guys, which was a kind of a fun problem too.
And so I like what you did there, which is one of the pieces of advice I give on the pod is you got to work on the A+ problem at any company. So regardless of what your role is, you should try to at least know what is the A+ problem of this
try to
company
be helpful
right now,
to the real problem.
and then try to be helpful on that. That's like, because that's the needle mover, and that's where you're going to get the most learning, the most action.
And I didn't necessarily do this on purpose. I actually wanted to quit at first because the PeopleSoft thing was so dumb and so horrible, and I couldn't figure it out. And my dad convinced me, don't quit, just like do what you can to be helpful otherwise there. So that was a good dad advice.
Yeah, good dad.
To an 18-year-old. Yeah.
I almost quit college for the same reason. And my dad was like, because I was like, I'm pretty mediocre here. I was like, I'm used to being good. Then you go to a top school.
You didn't feel like you were one of the best.
Now these were all the best high school kids. Now I'm kind of in the middle. So I was like, it's too expensive. Maybe I shouldn't be here. And he's like, that's exactly why you should be there.
You want to be challenged.
You want to be surrounded by people who are better than you.
So one of the things Alex Karp had an insight on, my co-founder Palantir, who was really good, is you can't really appreciate a talent unless you're within 2 standard deviations of it. So you think of talent as being on a normal curve for any typical skill. It could be for math, could be for podcasts, right, whatever it is. And so you kind of have a natural level of talent. You could shift slightly. And so the very best people in the world at something might be 4th or 5th standard deviation. But if you yourself are 2nd or 3rd standard deviation, you can at least start to appreciate that. Right. Whereas if let's say you're not great at physics, I don't know, if you meet Albert Einstein versus a top physics professor, you're gonna have no idea which one's Einstein, right? So it's the same thing in any other area. But
if you can differentiate.
Exactly. But once you can recognize that talent, that lets you then harness it for things you're building and doing. So it actually is very useful to be very good at something, even if you're not the best.
Right. Okay. Because you can notice because
you can understand
this is actually the 5 standard deviation talent.
I was good enough at computer science. Like I got able to get A+ at Stanford. I had friends who were way smarter than me at computer science, but I was good enough to know who those kids were and how to harness them and how to hire them. Right. So there's things like that.
That's interesting. So now you the next thing you do, you go and you start Palantir, which
actually, I worked for Peter's family office for a while, and he was the first investor in Facebook. It was just his family office. There's tons of crazy shit going on. It was really fun. It was like, a really expensive restaurant that went bankrupt. There was like a spam company someone was starting. There's all sorts of crazy shit. And I was there, and like, Peter's a genius, but he's not really a manager. So I started I'll take charge here. So I started hiring people with him and kind of helping him run things. And some of the older guys like, who the fuck is this 21-year-old kid? So we ended up working on a project that summer to map out like, what if we taken all the stuff we did at PayPal for anti-fraud and we generalized it to like for the intelligence community, what would that look like? And my roommate Stefan and I from Stanford at the time were like sketching up all these cool products, and we were building prototypes. And that was kind of the genesis of Palantir.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you basically had the PayPal showed you a bit of the problem.
It's like, so they like showed us a solution to a problem. They're like, wait a second, because basically what happened is I got to know all these guys at PayPal. They're in the Secret Service and FBI. Those are the two groups that are in charge of anti-fraud, of like arresting the mafia guys. And these guys would come to us and ask us for advice on other things, because it was like, it's kind of fun. It's cops and robbers. Like I don't know if every young man likes this, but it's in teleworld, of course, you want to help get the bad guys. So we were teaching them about cyber fraud or whatever you call internet fraud in 2000, 2001. And they start coming to us. And then 9/11 happened. And then the government started spending billions of dollars on like supposed solutions to catching bad guys, watching what's going on. And we knew these guys and we watched what they were spending money on. And we were like, oh my God, this is stupid. Like this is way behind Silicon Valley. Not that like I'm so smart, but Silicon Valley itself had gotten way ahead just because it brought talent from all over the world. So whatever was being done in what we call like the Beltway, basically in DC with the old integrators, they're still doing stuff from 20 years ago. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is like our nation's under attack. And we're wasting billions of dollars on stupid shit. So that's when we said, okay, let's get together. Let's draw up like what we could actually be doing here if they did it better.
What happens next? So like walk us through, because we see today, I think I looked this morning, it's a $50 billion market cap company. That's amazing, but it's also 20 years later. So if we rewind the clock to where most of the people who are going to listen to this are early stage, trying to figure things out, unclear which pathway to go, unclear if this is even going to work. Take me back to that. What did you do what was it like, and how'd you figure out like the first few steps?
Well, there's lots of different ways to build successful companies, right? So I don't ever want to be like, this is the path, but our path was, we were kind of watching all these companies come out of PayPal. So I was very lucky to be sitting there seeing like these guys, doing Ironport and LinkedIn and YouTube and Yelp and et cetera. So like watching these, and the ones that I could tell were more successful, we were obviously at the time, were the ones that are attracting the very best engineers. It's almost like engineers were lined up trying to get into these companies, right? So you think like a lot of times people have a business idea and you're like, how do I hire an engineer? Right. And like it's the opposite. It's like the ones that are crushing it. It's like a nightclub where the engineers wish they could follow those people in, and just those cultures, something about them. It's just it was just so dynamic. It was like they're able to try 10 times as much really quickly. You can just kind of tell like, wow, like you can be really smart at business, but like if you could try like 10 times as many things, like you can be like slightly less smart at business and still succeed, right? Because you get to iterate. So like, okay, we need to build somehow a really top engineering culture. Like that was like one of our core principles early on, is how do we used to say the engineer is king. Like how do you have a culture that attracts the very, very best and respects them and like makes them partially in charge of the company, with you. And so we spent a lot of time on that. It's a little bit chicken and egg. I was lucky to have a bunch of my friends from growing up who were national math and chess champions, and all these smart guys. And like, so we bring this really core culture together, convince some of these really top PhDs from MIT.
What was your pitch to them? Like what was the quick version that was getting them excited?
It's
because you need a magnet, something to bring the talent in.
The government spending tens of billions of dollars in this area. They're way behind what we figured out how to do in Silicon Valley. It's clear there's going to be a multi-billion-dollar company that solves this problem. And you describe the problem to them. It's this very hard technical thing that if we have the best engineers, we're going to be able to do it. And we're iterating closely, with national intelligence, with defense agencies, and you get to go and solve this problem. And if we succeed, we're going to save thousands of lives and we're going to protect civil liberties. That was a high level. It's like, it's a fun, big mission.
One of those things you said is we're working closely with these agencies. Like how easy was it to work with them? Because, you're young. How do they even take you seriously? You're young and you're different, right? You have a different approach.
Yeah. So maybe it wasn't entirely the case that they were iterating as closely as I'd like them to be with us for the first year or two. So Alex Karp was very good at this. Alex was at first just an advisor to us, helping us, and then Peter kept trying to like get us to hire a CEO, because Steph and I were 21, and you couldn't really have a 21-year-old running something, working with like senators and the Defense Department. But like these guys, these generals or former admirals would come in, and they just did not understand tech culture. And I'm sure they were great guys. They just wouldn't have fit at all with us. And so finally, Alex Karp had been like helping Peter raise money for things. They're friends from law school, and he was a PhD in philosophy in Germany. And in Europe, a lot of the billionaires like to pretend they're philosophers. It's like the high status thing to do. Kind of like here, they like to pretend they're podcasters or something. I don't know. But so basically, like he knew all these wealthy people. And so he started advising us how to talk to them, how to meet them, how to think about how institutions worked. And he had all these like casting things in terms of like how you had to approach people to take you seriously, which.
What do you mean by that? I don't understand.
Like if we show up and we're like these like quirky 21-year-olds from Silicon Valley, that's the wrong casting. Whereas if you show up and you walk in the door with you, the former head of the CIA, and Peter Thiel's made the intro after being at PayPal, and another one of his friends who's senior has explained to them that this is a project that they're helping, and that it's going to help in this way based on this big advancement made in Silicon Valley, and that they've already been talking to a bunch of people at the FBI and et cetera, and they want your feedback. Like that's like a high status way to come in the room.
Right.
Whereas if I come in the room and be like, look how smart I am, look how right this is better than what you're doing. Right. Like look at how smart it is.
While
like,
you're wearing a hoodie.
Yeah, exactly. They're like. Yeah, I guess I think a lot of young people maybe underestimate the substance is important, but you can't lead with substance because substance is not taken seriously. So you have to have the substance to win, but you have to have all the trappings of why they're taking it seriously and why they're comfortable doing it and why it makes sense. So anyway, there's these things like this about how the real world works and who to talk to in the institution, who to get your help. So Alex just had like this wisdom about like people and institutions and how to navigate that like the rest of us, we had the best tech culture, but we didn't have that. And so we actually convinced him to pretend to be CEO for a few years so that Peter would stop trying to hire like a really like senior like military guy. But then he was such a good CEO, then he's still CEO 20 years later.
Right.
So it worked out.
And you mentioned Peter. Peter was not active day to day necessarily.
No, but he was critical for the company.
He's critical. What was he doing?
Peter was like, first of all, he's the financial support that no one would give us crazy kids. Like I told you, there's all these crazy projects going on. Like a lot of people around him are like, this is the craziest thing you're doing. Like it's one thing to waste money on a restaurant, but like you're sending these kids to pretend to be spies and build things and until like, what are you thinking? There's no such thing as a company that does this. So like you have to give him credit for like being willing to bet on a crazy idea.
Yeah, he put a lot of money into it, right? Like
it was several $1 million early on, which to the point, which is like, and then we had this fund started putting things alongside others. But I mean, yeah, that's a huge amount of money for like crazy kids. Is what are we doing? And then like Peter was really good for strategy. He was really key on. I think one of the most important things is he stopped us from a couple of early partnerships. This is one thing that people screw up a lot with startups. A lot of startups, when you're getting going, you want to like. You get really excited about some partnership on the table and you think it's going to really help you, but a lot of partnerships will cap your upside. A lot of partnerships will limit your ability to iterate and to try other things. And I think because he had the experience and he was going for a multi-billion-dollar win, he was really able to like steer us away from a lot of big mistakes early on.
Like what would have been a partnership that would have been maybe
like we would have like spent like all of our time selling our interface in Europe to give them all the rights to it, and we would have had to fly over there and support things they were doing. Or there's just like random things that like sounded really good because when you're getting going, you're desperate for that first 500,000 million revenue and stuff, and like, but you have to make sure you get it in a way that's going to actually scale into something much bigger. That's not like a mess that's going to distract you.
Right. And Peter he's an interesting guy for sure. You said restaurant. Curious, like
I mean, there was everything. I think so. This is like not unique to Peter, by the way. This is a really common rule: is that whenever someone becomes very successful for the first time, they usually become more expansive if they're an entrepreneur. I mean, all of us, we like to build things or we like to create things, and so once you have success, you're like, okay, I'm really good at that. I probably could be really good at these 6 things as well. And then I think we all forget, okay, the reason I was really good at this first thing is because I was like obsessively working on it for 80 or 90 hours a week. Right. And I brought like 30 of my smartest friends into it and we all iterated like crazy and we almost died multiple times and we barely made it work.
Right. But you kind of forget that.
You kind of forget that part and you're just like, oh yeah, I did this. And so you do all these things.
I can snap my fingers and
exactly. Like we're gonna do this. It's like playing Risk, where you're conquering. And like it turns out that's not a good way. But this is what I've seen almost everyone go through this. Like unless I'm lucky to have watched multiple other friends go through it. So I still made the mistake in different ways. But so there was very expansive, and there were some things that maybe didn't make as much sense, and then of course, but he's so freaking smart that some of them did make a lot of sense. He wrote the first check into Facebook at that time, so I mean, give me a break. You can. I mean, everyone in venture is not going to have a 100% hit rate, and so you learn from your mistakes.
Were you around when he wrote that check into Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, I get no credit for it, and like
at the time, did it seem like a big deal, or was it just like one of many things that he was doing? It was unclear that was Facebook. It
was one of many things. They seemed particularly smart and interesting, and I I can't say I thought it was going to be as big as it was. I don't think anyone realized that, but it was clear they were really smart, really interesting guys who were very aggressive. And so it was a fun thing to be exposed. So I think one of my good friends who actually helped Peter write the check is played in the movie by an African-American guy, I think, which he jokes about, but it's like, it was a good time to be there. It was fun.
He's like a 5'4" white guy.
He's exactly the little Jewish guy. It's like,
that's the ultimate compliment.
Sorry, James, no credit for you.
If anyone out there wants to rewrite me as like a super handsome black guy, I would love that. That'd be amazing. Thank you for doing this.
Awesome.
Thanks, John. Give you the highest compliment, which is I learned a lot today. That's my goal with all these is what are some of the things that, a couple of golden nuggets that come out of this. So thank you so much for doing it.
It's fun to get to know you.
Yeah, right on.
I feel like I can rule the world. I know I could be what I want to. I put my all in it like no days off. On the road, let's travel, never looking back.